desde atrás, desde la cabina. ¿Me abren el micro desde la cabina? Muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone.
Muchas gracias por acompañarnos.
Thank you very much for being here in this very important day for the dairy sector. We are here in the third Forum, Dairy Sustainability Forum, organized by ENLAC, called Decarbonization, Green Agenda and Animal Welfare will be the focus of the debates of the experts meeting in the EU
las
capital.
estrategias y experiencias en ese camino que nos va a llevar
And we
hacia un
will
sector
talk
lácteo
then
mucho más
of
sostenible.
strategies
Vamos a
that
tener
will lead us to a very more
oportunidad de
sustainable
abordar
dairy
desde la hoja de
sector.
ruta para minimizar
We
el
will
impacto
be able
ambiental.
to
Vamos a poder saber
focus
hasta qué
of
punto es consciente
the
la sociedad
roadmap that are going
de
to
las
minimize our
externalidades
impact
positivas de la
on the
ganadería o el
environment and the
impacto
different
de los
opportunities we
desarrollos
have for
normativos
the
en torno al
impact
bienestar animal durante el transporte.
on animal
Esta es la
welfare during
tercera
transport.
convocatoria
This is
del
the
Foro
third
Lácteo y se marca dentro de la
opportunity
campaña
of the
Cuenta con los
forum,
productos
Dairy
lácteos
Forum,
europeos,
that
que
is
pretende
called
contribuir con
Count
sus
on
acciones a poner en
European
valor la
dairy
sostenibilidad del
products,
sector
that
lácteo al
aims
tiempo que
at
comunican los
improving
valores
sustainability of the
nutricionales
dairy
y
sector,
los beneficios saludables
also
de los alimentos lácteos, ya saben,
informing
tres
about
lácteos
the
al día. El foro va a estar vertebrado, les explico un poquito en torno a dos
food
mesas redondas, una primera
sustainability.
mesa
So we're going to have a roundtable, a first inaugural roundtable.
de Agricultura, perdón, de la Comisión
We're
Europea,
going
la
to hear from the DG Dairy sector
este esfuerzo por la sostenibilidad en
and
una
how
oportunidad
this
para
effort
impulsar la
can become an
internacionalización
opportunity
de los
to
lácteos europeos. En la
impose
segunda mesa
European
ya nos
dairy
vamos a centrar
products.
en aspectos
In the
más
second
concretos
roundtable, we're going
de
to
la
focus on
sostenibilidad,
more
como el reto de la descarbonización, el
concrete
bienestar
ideas
animal
like
y ese nuevo
the
reglamento
decarbonization
comunitario
and
sobre
this
el
new
transporte de animales vivos. Para inaugurar este foro contamos con la directora
normative
general
on
de Directorate-General
animal
láctea,
transport.
Nuria Arribas, por favor.
For this, we're going to listen to Nuria Arribas, Managing Director of InLac.
Muchas gracias, María. Muchas gracias a todos los asistentes.
Thank you, Maria, and
Es un
thank you
placer
everyone
estar
for
un año
being
más
here.
aquí
For me,
en
it's a
Bruselas
pleasure
con
to be
todos
one more
vosotros.
year here in Brussels
La
with you.
Organización Interprofessional Láctea ha puesto en
The
marcha
INLAC
una
has
exigente y
started a
ambiciosa
very
hoja
demanding
de
and
ruta
ambitious
para un sector lácteo
roadmap
económico,
for a
social y
sustainable
medioambientalmente
dairy
sostenible.
product.
Con ello estamos sentando
This is
las
why
bases
we want
hacia
to
un
set
futuro más
the
sostenible para el
basis
sector
for a
lácteo
more
español,
sustainable
destacando objetivos
sector,
globales de sostenibilidad ambiental,
highlighting the environmental advantages that are in line with that European strategy from farm to fork, and at the same time setting out commitments to progress and a set of indicators to quantify them. This is the idea in the end. I believe that the dairy sector is taking a historic steps in the right direction. In this roadmap, the dairy value chain is committed to meeting key targets, such as decreasing greenhouse emissions and improving air quality, focusing on efficient water management and soil regeneration. Today, we are having too much water, but usually it's not the case. Also, it's essential to incorporate new technologies and best practices throughout the value chain, from production to dairy food processing. And it should be a priority that we take advantage this sustainable dairy management to improve the ecosystems and also promoting digitalization, in which we are working on. Also the inclusion of young people and women, that is a modern sector, sustainable, increasing rural sustainability. We also a number of specific commitments that include reducing greenhouse emissions, improving air quality by reducing ammonia emissions, promoting regenerative agriculture, and sustainable water management. These strategies are aligned with the European and national policies as well as the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Progress towards all these goals will be assessed through the monitoring mechanism that will allow strategies to be adjusted according to the technological and scientific developments. This comprehensive approach ensures that the dairy sector remains a vital part of the Spanish economy that we so need while we move towards a more sustainable future. Before concluding, I would like to remind you certain numbers so you can see the importance in economic, social, and environmental level for the dairy sector. This dairy sector, be it cattle, sheep, or goat, has a turnover of around 13,000 million euros per year, generating 70,000 direct direct jobs in Spain alone. I always talk about this agricultural sector as the main sector job sector in the country. Dairy industries account for 9.5 billion euros a year and 30,000 people. Might not be the first sector, but we are moving forward to be it. As I was saying, dairy industries account 9.5 billion euros a year in turnover and employs 30,000 people. But I don't want to bore you with numbers. The important part here are the speakers that we've brought to make this event a success. So I'm going to give them the floor so they can talk to you about sustainability in this third forum of dairy products. Count on European dairy products. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Nuria. La primera lección es que el
Thank you very much, Nuria. The first thing to learn is that the dairy sector is sustainable in itself. Now we need to increase our efforts so that it gets better and be as more sustainable as possible. For all of this, we have invited certain people from animal productions of the unit of Director-General of Agriculture, Carlos Martín Óvilo, with the speech that is called Sustainability in the Dairy Sector. Go ahead, Mr. Martín Óvilo.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Ahora me da apuro presentar cifras porque ha dicho Nuria que no quiere aburrir con cifras.
I don't want to present numbers now because Nuria said they want to bore you with this. But in any case, thank you very much, Nuria, for this introduction and InLac for inviting us to be a part of this talk and in general for everything we do for the dairy sector. I love this campaign of 3 dairy products per day. I loved seeing trucks going in front of my house with InLac and a lot of advertising. For me, that was amazing. Why are we talking about sustainability? We are in this third forum, meaning that there have been 2 more. We've been 3 years speaking about dairy products, and in the Commission, in a certain way, we're talking about sustainability almost always, but especially in the last few years.
Esta mañana antes de venir estaba mirando
This morning, before coming,
orientaciones políticas de
I was watching the political orientations of President von der Leyen for this period, this new period, and the ones that Jean-Claude Juncker did in his time. And I tried to find the amount, curiously, the same amount of times, both in Juncker's and von der Leyen, 12 times in both, but with different meanings. With Juncker's, it was more about more economical sustainability, or economical sustainability. In the last 5 years, we're talking about sustainability, talking more about environmental sustainability.
Para el periodo que empieza ahora, que está a punto de
For the period that's starting now, that it's about to start, this is a concept that's going to continue to be on the table. There's no doubt about it. If we look at the political orientations with the ones President von der Leyen was elected by the Parliament to continue to be president, the first page she speaks about a new plan for competitivity, sustainable competitivity. And they announced the vision for agricultural and food within sustainability. If we look at the letter that it was sent to the Commissioner-designate Hansen, that is a bit the amount of tasks they have from their mandate, it is clearly said your mandate is to increase competitiveness, resilience, and sustainability of the agricultural sector. That is why I say sustainability is going to continue to be with us in the next 5 years. But sometimes you repeat it so much that it's a bit saturated, and it might seem that it loses meaning, but it is important to remember from time to time the importance and the value that it has to someone being sustainable. This morning I bought this milk and I was asking, is this sustainable? I have no doubt in my mind this is sustainable, otherwise it wouldn't be in the shelves of the supermarket. Is the dairy sector sustainable? I think you said it in the introduction. You can say globally it is sustainable, but it is a concept very dynamic.
claramente es algo sostenible cuando no es insostenible.
Something is clearly sustainable when it is not unsustainable. And if we see from an economical, social, and environmental point of view, what can you say if something is not sustainable economical? That it can't keep on. So we're not talking about a dairy sector that is not sustainable economically. From the social sector, okay, this is a trickier domain because social sustainability is more related to feeling, to an idea. When you say something is socially sustainable, is that it's acceptable when we're talking about animal welfare, health, food income. There is not a clear line. This is sustainable and this is not. Then you had environmental sustainability. This is a bit more quantifiable than social sustainability, but it is still less clear than economical sustainability. And 90% of the times, lately, when someone talks about sustainability, we have three axes, but when we talk about sustainability, most people think about environmental sustainability. And today, we're clearly talking about decarbonization and CO2 emissions. And this is more what I'm going to talk about in my introduction. First of all, we need to say the obvious part, and is that the cattle has a clear impact in the climate, mainly in greenhouse emissions, and also contaminating water, land and air. Well, this last one is more in the big areas, in the areas with big cattle production. But this is mainly regarding cattle and not the other sort of animals, like goats or sheep. But we do have greenhouse emissions, and this is where I have to be boring. I'm going to have to give you some numbers. Agriculture is responsible of 11% of the total of greenhouse emissions. From that 11%, 2/3 are from the cattle sector. So if we add this, we say that 14% come from the cattle sector. This is mainly regarding the emissions and other problems. The dairy sector is only a fourth of this, however. When we say that this was a total in Europe, but in Spain it's about 10%. 10% of the greenhouse emissions are from cattle. This is irrefutable. But we also need to remember that in the last 30 years, from 90 until 2001, more or less, the emissions in Europe have fallen in around 23%. You know, this is the moment like politicians take graphics, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to show you a graphic right now. This is a graphic that shows the evolution of greenhouse emissions in the world, and the only one going down is the Europe. We are the only region in the world who is reducing greenhouse emissions right now when livestock in the world. And there's also a little bit there from the United States. So we have to admit that we're doing something right. We're going in the right direction. Everything shows that this tendency is going to be perpetuated. Seeing the forecast for different member states, we can add 4% extra, and if we add all the mitigation measures that are being started with the private and public measures, we can even say the reduction is going to reach 8%. These reductions has also happened because there's been a reduction of the number of livestock. And the idea is that it's going to continue to decrease. It's going to decrease 1% in the last 10-20 years, and the provision is that this continue to decrease in the next 20 years. But we have to be very careful because we shouldn't think this is the only or the one way of reducing emissions, because we can maybe forget that the livestock sector is also needed for certain things. For example, for transforming residue biomass that could not be used for anything else. So thanks to animals, we have the miracle, for me it's a miracle, they can transform different residue in this milk, in the cheese we have in the entrance. For me, this is a miracle. And we shouldn't live without it. When it comes to the use of soil, most livestock uses lands that cannot be used for other things. We cannot use it to plant fruits or vegetables or others. So to be able to keep that land in good state, we need livestock. Livestock also sequesters carbon. Thanks to cattle, we also can preserve biodiversity. We allow to maintain certain wild species in certain areas. Once again, when we talk about extensive cattle, it was also a source of sustainable energy. A few years ago, for example, also, when the Ukraine March started, we saw how dependent we are on fertilizers on the outside. And actually, there is a source of fertilizers that are local, that are green, and that is our animals. I could continue giving you a long list of advantages. They allow to control biomass, they avoid wildfires. This is the advantage of having animals outside just eating grass, without talking about the nutritional benefits of these products that are irreplaceable. We have public instruments to support all of these positive aspects and to try and reduce as much as possible the negative effects. As a private sector has not waited for the public measures, and they've started loads of measures. We've seen cooperatives in Spain, in Germany, in Denmark, establishing programs to measure their emissions, to reduce them, to decarbonize, etc. So there are so many advantages. And I've brought here a list of different activities that can show this, particularly with these strategical plans. And there are a big number of things that are being done. With the last reform, we changed the green structure and different conditions. It's reinforced to improve this policy, but particularly when it comes to the eco schemes and other measures, we're doing a lot. We are financing the introduction of temporary barriers. We are introducing other elements that improve the soil. Leguminous plants that allow this to improve the quality of the dairy and also the soil. We're also creating different agro-silvestry measures and permanent meadows or prairies. when it comes to investment
muchos
measures.
Estados miembros están financiando inversiones
A
para la
lot
gestión
of member
del
states
estiércol,
are
el almacenamiento del
investing
estiércol
in
de manera más eficiente, sistemas de gestión anaeróbica,
manure
para el
stockage,
aprovechamiento del estiércol y el aprovechamiento del metano,
and using the methane from this, different techniques
del estiércol,
for distributing manure in a more precise way,
en la gestión de
etc.
los animales. También en la PAC financiamos la utilización de
Taking into consideration the animal welfare and the CAP, we're also using different additives that reduce the emissions of certain gases by the cattle.
De proteínas para evitar la alimentación con un exceso de nitrógeno que generaría un exceso de emisiones.
We also try to avoid an excess of nitrogenous that is more harmful. We also promote certain races that are older and that are better for the environment.
No solamente bienestar, sino la sanidad de los animales.
We also promote animals' health and reduction of emissions. All of this is being done with the strategic plans and in a horizontal way, also training and
de asesoramiento, etcétera. Esto es lo que se hace ahora.
Consulting, etc. This is what is being done right now. In the next few years, and as it has been said, we're going to continue with the sustainability idea on the table. Next week, next Monday, Christoph Hansen, the Council designate, is going to go through the hearing in the Parliament, as you already know. They're going to grill him in the Parliament about what he is foreseing of doing if he is elected in his mandate. They're giving it some advanced questions, and our commission asked 5 questions. And from those 5 questions, 1, so 20%, are what are your plans of development, the cattle or livestock sector, in the contribution to the climate plan. So clearly, for the Parliament, this is important. From these 5 questions, 1 talks about cattle. That means it is important for them. And the questions, you can see them, they're public. You're available. Our very likely future commissioner talks about what he's going to mention, the social and strategical importance of the cattle sector in the agriculture and the European economy. He also has faith about the emissions that they be reduced, etc. So says mostly what I've already said, but also that we need to reduce more the emissions. He says, we're doing a lot and we're going on the right path, but we need to continue and do more. And we're going to need to continue to support from the European Union these initiatives. The first measure he mentions is improving the way we measure emissions. First of all, we always talk about measuring, but the greenhouse emissions, as far as I know, cannot be measured. No one can measure the emissions of a farm. It depends on the animals, of the way they produce. There's no like a device you can measure the emissions. No. When I take this graphic talking about the emissions, it's a bit calculated regarding certain standards. But it's not that accurate. They've increased, they diminished. I do more than you, you do less. It's all an approximation, and that is why we put into evidence in the strategical dialogue that we need an element that we say how much emissions do we produce and how we reduce, and that we all speak the same language, that if a French company with a Spanish company with a Dutch company, if you say I'm gonna give this incentive to my farmers and this other, that we all speak the same language. And also that we are capable to improving how much the good practices are positive. How much did they reduce the emissions? For this, we need a harmonized system. And this is the first task for our Commissioner-designate Of course, afterwards, he talks about technological innovation, better measuring, genetics, animal welfare, animal health, additives, manure, etc. So he talks about everything that's already being done and needs to be continued and increased. He finishes his reply saying that if he is elected, in the first 10 days he needs to present a vision for agricultural and food system, and he believes that the cattle sector will be key. With this, I finish my intervention. As you can see, it is very pertinent. It's been very pertinent in the last few years, and it's going to continue. So I only hope to see you again in the 4th Sustainability Forum next year. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Yo saco una segunda lección de esta
Carlos. There's another lesson to be learned here. If I had a pen here, I would say that the challenge is not of decarbonization, but competitive decarbonization, where there's not a digital gap, where we can keep the competitiveness, because we have to be sustainable, but in different fields, such as economically, environmentally, and so on. And that competitiveness, we can achieve it if we advance in decarbonization in order to differentiate our products in the market. And our next speaker will talk about that. The intervention is from Tomás García Azcárate, and he's going to talk about the sustainable European model will give wings to the internationalization of the dairy sector.
Bueno, muchas gracias. La palabra ilustrar.
Thank you very much. You used the word illustrate, and well, that scares me a bit. I'm going to try and talk about my reflections. When Nuria called me and told me about this meeting, and I reflect about some questions, and I wanted to share my answers today with you. If you have other answers, other reflections, I would be happy to listen to them. Talking about internationalization, I'm sorry if I provide some figures. Nuria said at the beginning that he was not going to provide many. I will, some of them. The reality is that all European countries produce dairy products, produce milk. We have in order to use the European terminology, I will talk about the member states, which are great producers, such as France, for example. And Spain maybe is not in the front line, but we have more than 10,000 livestock breeders. And I think that's an important contribution to the economy. And not only to the national economy, which is also important, there are some productions which are the key, the cornerstone for the European market in some regions, such as, for example, plant-based productions. We have, for example, sugar beets or milk in some regions in the north of Spain, but also the south, Catalonia, and so on. If to beef cattle we include other sectors, we talk about, for example, Andalusia with goat milk, or Castilla y León with goat milk. So the importance of the local production is it's very high if we talk about the measures such as GDP, for example. And I think the local level is important here because many regions depend on this activity. And I'm not talking about the production activity, but also the industrial activity. Another important element of the system is that the industry, which is processing milk, is in rural areas. We talk about providing industrial and agricultural employment in these regions where this industry is so important. If we talk about economic sustainability, we saw the real importance here of the dairy sector. It's even bigger than what figures show. As per Europe, Europe exports, that's also very relevant. Spain also exports products such as cheese, but in Europe we export, and we have to bear that in mind when we talk about sustainability.
¿Por qué si somos más exigentes? Si nuestra tierra es más cara, si nuestra mano de obra es más cara, si las reglas europeas son más severas que en el resto del mundo, y eso implica, evidentemente,
have to get paid more if our regulations are more strict. Why continue exporting if there's competitiveness or other competitors which are cheaper because we are the best? In Europe, we provide a guarantee, flavor, diversity of products. We provide a lot of guarantees in comparison with other products from other regions in the world. In China, for example, when there's a problem with pollution, and let's remember that in China for many years there was this policy of a single child. So if they see that for a contamination problem they can put in risk what's most valuable for them, which is the descendants, where are they going to buy the dairy products if they know that from our region they can get savory products, high-quality products, and health and safety are very important in the food sector. If you are not the cheapest one, you have to be the best, and that's what we are. And we have to say it. And in Spain, we are making some progress. And we are advancing in the exporting of cheese in Spain. This shows the efforts of the chain to be present where it's important. Let's talk about economic sustainability. We talked about social sustainability when we talked about the importance of the local level. When talking about the industry in these regions, and we also have to talk about environmental sustainability.
Yo creo que estamos como pasa en el boletín escolar de mis hijos y en el mío, la verdad, cuando yo estaba en la escuela.
Same at what happens at school with my children, and it happened to me at school as well. We wanted the teachers to tell us that they were progressing successfully. And I think we can say that for our sector. We will go into further details later on. But I think there's a political problem that I heard before. There's this urgent subject, which is the climate change, and we are experiencing it in our territories. There's an urgency to take some action. But the agricultural transition should be done hand in hand with the stakeholders, such as the companies, distribution companies, and so on. They have to be committed to the change. We have to advance rapidly as much as possible. And when I analyze the Timmermans era, it reminds me of the Manson era. I'm still a teacher of agricultural policy and I love history. And I loved European history and national history. In this 1968, this expert analyzed the situation and proposed some suggestions, which created a revolution in the agricultural sector. He proposed to eliminate 5 million cows and eliminate many agricultures and so on. This was in the year 1968. And there was really a great revolution. The European community, at that point it was still not the European Union, and 3 social economical directives were approved. Timmermans was right in the diagnosis of the urgency of the climate change, but it's also important to understand that if we want to advance too rapidly, or advance faster than the society can accept, in the end you are progressing slowly. That's what von der Leyen understood, and that's what's been extracted from the strategic dialogue, which establishes the new agenda for the next commissioner and the next commission. If I had to sum it up, it would be we need to advance, but we need to convince people, not impose our opinions. And I think this is a very heartwarming message, because I think it is the way to advance. If we talk about globalization and global impacts, let's reflect. Those who do things better in the sustainability, we are reducing their production because we are starting importing from others which are farther away. What's most important here is the planet, so it would be worse for the planet. So that would be counterproductive. As I said, we need to convince, not impose. We have this strategic document from the dialogue, and it is reflected on the letter the commissioners received, and it's included in the answers the commissioners gave to the questions from the Parliament. And I repeat the message. We need to put some pressure, yes, that's true, for the sector to be active, but at the same time we need to convince. Timmermans made a mistake, which was just saying what we have to do and that's it. I think Europe has learned to negotiate now, and I think we will be advancing successfly. And to conclude, I want to highlight what Nuria said, which is the strategic plan to 2030 that the InLac created. I would pronounce a criticism, but it's not your fault, Nuria. One day we should pass from small intersectoriality to big intersectoriality. What do I mean? Apart from the commitments established by the different suggestions from the sector, I think it's also important to count on these suggestions also for the distribution chain. What I like about the plan's approach is that it is a holistic approach, including different efforts from the stakeholders. So maybe in the fourth forum, we will be able to celebrate that this holistic vision of the chain also includes the distribution chain, which is also important and must be committed. And we should also establish another dialogue with the consumers, because they are also part of the sustainability project. I think we have established some commitments that are available, that Nuria mentioned at the beginning of the session. I'm not going to repeat them, but I think these commitments show that we can work hand in hand, that we are doing it, and we are doing it successfully. There are some indicators, such as, for example, these spaces, to measure how we are advancing. Carlos has shared some results, such as, for example, the importance to improve our measurement of the commitments, because commitments must be based on indicators. Global indicators have positive results, but in the livestock sector, we see that from the ministry they made some efforts to talk about the indicators of the use of antibiotics in the sector. And thanks to these indicators, first of all, we raised awareness on the sector, and
de desfile de la Guardia Civil por las explotaciones ha permitido una disminución sensible del consumo de
has achieved a reduction on the use of antibiotics in the livestock sector without the police having to follow or do visits to different farms. In the fourth forum, I'm sure that Nuria and all the colleagues in InLac will be able to present the best results in this joint pathway that we have had. Thank you very much. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions, but let's continue, and after the round table we will open the questions and answers section. We are talking about the current situation of the European dairy sector to deal with the challenge of decarbonization. Now we will get into further details about, for example, decarbonization of the sector, or one of the regulations, the new regulation on transport of living animals, live animals, which is difficult for some of the countries in the south. And we have different people, such as, for example, Santiago Campos, which is representing Asaja in Brussels, Jaume Bernis, which is responsible for livestock sectors of COAG, and he is advisor of the group number 3 of the European Economic and Social Committee. Let's give them a round of applause before starting.
Bueno, pues mientras se coloca Paula de Vera, que es nuestra
Paula de Vera will be the first speaker for today. She's going to talk about animal welfare, and with the elections everything was stopped. They only advanced on the topic of animal welfare in the transport of live animals. Paula, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Sí, funciona. Espero que se me
oiga bien. Is the microphone working?
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone.
Mi nombre es Paula de Vera.
My name is Paula de Vera, and it is a pleasure for me to be here today. First of all, I wanted to say a brief introduction about myself. I'm a veterinarian. I studied in the Polytechnica of Madrid. I've worked for 6 years in COPA-Cogeca, representing the interests at a European level of different livestock organizations, and I focus on plant-based health and animal health. During the strategy Farm to Fork, I had to deal with 2 dossiers which were very important, such as animal welfare and decarbonization. The only proposal which was approved from the welfare animal dossier was animal welfare in the transport of live animals. We have some of the highest standards in the field of animal welfare, and this is an added value for our products because it's more difficult to produce them, but we continue doing it, and this is highly valued in some countries. Maybe this is not reflected in the economic results, but it's in many cases this is important. On the other hand, we know that there are challenges and opportunities for the producers, and this strategy from farm to fork approved in 2020 had 2 objectives, like, for example, establishing higher standards for animal welfare in order to have even higher standards, and creating a new regulation on labeling the animal welfare in order to inform consumers, so that when consumers are consuming products such as milk, honey, and so on, they knew about the level of animal welfare of that product. But we are aware that the objective was to incentivize producers to adopt better practices. We identified some challenges and opportunities, but we thought that it was a good idea. We wanted to be as proactive as possible. And after some months, there were the first assessments from the Commission and from EFSA. EFSA only for animal welfare and based on scientific evidence, and the Commission tried to focus on the social and economical elements. We consider that in both cases they didn't make enough efforts. From EFSA there were not recent evidence, for example, in the references. There were studies from the 50s. I think that's not relevant for the assessment because it is not updated information. And from the Commission's assessment, we consider that we saw that the results were not very encouraging for most sectors because they were estimating a reduction on the production, on the economic results, and so on. So we considered that that was the main obstacle. And then we had to analyze how to advance, how to move forward, but with more oriented results. I don't know who talked about time. means resources. If we have these two things, we can advance. I'm going to talk about the proposal of animal welfare on transport. It was approved, it was presented last year, and it is now under the review of the institutions, and they try to apply different rules, more strict rules, such as, for example, a reduction on the time of transport. We want to improve the Regulation 1/2015 and improving the quality on the transport of animals. We are identifying that this new regulation is going to affect especially countries with a great territory or with different conditions. For example, we see different challenges with the transport of calves, very young calves. We are talking about 2 to 5 weeks. We are seeing that we are identifying the same consequences, and we don't have much time to apply these changes. Austria and 2 other countries have more strict rules than the European one, so we see that the modifications would have to be applied, and we would need more time. So in order, how do I want to conclude? Well, I want to say that first we need to science-based advances in order to present legislative projects. The economic sustainability is a key element, especially when we want to accompany, we want to include all livestock breeders. We need very detailed assessment, and we need to be based on animal welfare, but also animal health. These two are linked, and that would be it from my part.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you very much, Paula.
Se imbrican la descarbonización, la sostenibilidad.
It's important to see how to link decarbonization, sustainability, and animal welfare. And Santiago, representing Asaja, you have the floor.
El sector agropecuario español europeo, en el que se encuentra el sector
Our sector, our agricultural and livestock sector, is reaching a turning point, and we see it in the figures and in the data. I think we have the right objective, but we need to assess the roadmap we have. We can choose a sector which produces in a sustainable way, but we are quantifying results, production results and emissions results, but we are quite dependent on third countries and CAP. It is a sector which produces sustainably, but it has to be competitive. It has to be attractive for younger generations, which helps people settle down in rural areas, and it should be, this advance should be based on innovation and technology in order to achieve this sustainability and efficiency. Sustainability, which could apply to other sectors in the agricultural and livestock sector, would be based in different elements, such as welfare, animal welfare. We know there's a package of the Commission with 4 pillars, which was focused on transport, but they also talk about welfare in relation to leveling in the farms and so on. That is not advancing at the moment, but we have to pay attention to that, and bearing in mind the different characteristics of the countries. In Spain, it's always going to be more difficult than for a country in Central Europe. What we have to take into account is that if we want to do this strategy hand in hand with the European Green Deal and the farm-to-fork strategy, or if we want to have a strategic dialogue on the future of the livestock sector, we are seeing in the past few months that we need a more inclusive way. Livestock breeders are being heard, and it's different to the European Green Deal, where legislation was presented and they had to apply it in the practice. We want to base our regulation on incentives and make a sector dependent based on different European funds and criteria.
La Comisión Europea, el Gobierno de España, ha trabajado en eso.
On the other hand, you have the supply chain. The European Union has worked on this with the Directive of Practices
comerciales desleales o la bien en España la cadena alimentaria que van en esa dirección de fomentar una retribución justa al agricultor, que al final es el primer eslabón, es el motor en realidad de la cadena y del que parte toda la actividad del resto de la cadena alimentaria, y en el que, con determinadas medidas como esta directiva que plantea el prohibir la venta a pérdidas, que también en España lo tenemos ya.
We also need to avoid loss.
Vender, por ejemplo, productos no perecederos,
products, and also
menos de 30 días,
selling
en fin, una serie de medidas
products in under 30 days so that they don't go bad.
Esa retribución más justa dentro de la cadena, aunque siga habiendo desajustes, como vemos,
so even if there are
una cosa es la teoría y luego lo que
differences, because one is theory and the rest is the practice is different, but we're going in the right direction, and we want to continue in it. On the other hand, there are the free trade agreements. This has a very big impact,
de la Unión Europea y de cada
and it's based in the European Union and each member state. And what we have seen, particularly now, that the Mercosur-EU trade agreement is being activated, is an incoherency with the environmental goals that we have in the European Union and the trade conditions that are signed with other countries. For example, all the industry, the producer, the distributors have reached the conclusion that
no ha quedado bien claro, pero bueno, unos hábitos de consumo en el que la carne juega un papel, digamos, debe ser al menos una información mayor, ¿no? Que es lo que nosotros abogamos.
A big role and should have more information. I mean, we don't want to criminalize any sector, but it should have more information. And then a trade agreement in the Mercosur that is based mainly in cattle and bovine meat that is being important. So we're trying to reduce the consumption of meat in Europe, but then we import cheaper meat from other countries.
Llegamos ya a un punto que atañe bastante específico del sector lácteo, que son las demandas del consumidor.
Of the dairy sector that adapts to the demands of the
ha visto cómo su principal producto, que es la leche,
dairy sector has seen that its main product, being milk, is being substituted or complemented, as you might see, with alternative products like soy or almond drinks and others. Is consumption
voluntarios, o también podemos hablar de hábitos de consumo inducidos.
Patterns are keep criminalizing the sector of being not sustainable, and we do this with lack of data, because sometimes we do these accusations without knowing the data, and even the WHO says that meat and dairy products have essential elements for nourishment of the human being, and that they cannot be replaced. So we need to know if these accusations are based on facts or they're just trying to find a scapegoat. Lastly, this creates a bottleneck and we arrive to a very alarming situation. When we see the official data, we see that a few years ago there was 60,000 exploitation, now there's 12,000. So we've gone from 10 to 2, a rate of 10 to 2. So this is a sector that is being less and less attractive, a sector that has to face very heavy red tape, and if young people want to go to rural areas, they have to face little accessibility, lack of infrastructure.
Los factores que sufre el sector lácteo, el sector agropecuario, tienen como consecuencia una falta de relevo generacional.
So this leads to a lack of taking over by young people of the sector, of agricultural sector. Well, thank you, Santiago. Applause for him. And with this, we're going to reach to the next speaker. Paula had already said that from this well-being package, the only initiative that has continued is the transport of live animals, the regulation on the transport of live animals. And today, we have the opportunity of having here the rapporteur of the opinion on animal welfare in the transport of live animals.
Jaume Bernis, adelante.
Jaume Bernis, go ahead. You have the floor. Thank you, Maria. First of all, I'd like to thank InLac for this invitation, for giving me the opportunity of taking part in this forum, bringing to you a subject that is worrying for us, cattle workers, and in general, members of the agricultural sector. Both my colleagues here, Santiago and Paula, have said a lot of the things I was going to say. But I would like to take this debate and sort of induce you to have a debate with this new proposal of the regulation that I had the opportunity of being the rapporteur in the Economical and Social Committee. All of us who voted on this, we firmly believe that the result of this opinion, from the point of view of the EESC, that we need to know that this is an entity that does proposals to the Commission and the Parliament. We're not a deciding entity. We just have the competences of presenting the point of view from our work within the committee and from our working group, where we had a text that received the approval of the plenary of the EESC with 165 votes in favor. This is therefore an opinion that received a very high approval rate. And we believe both the Commission and the Parliament, or we hope at least that they will take it into consideration. It is an opinion, as Paula said, that has been active from 2005 and that currently is leading us to work the way we work.
Desde mi punto de vista como ganadero con más de 40 años de experiencia,
from my point of view of a cattle worker with many years of experience, we're making us work better and respecting more the well-being of the animals when the willingness is there, because This is what we need to say. In Europe, there are a lot of lobbies that what they pretend is just reduce the consumption of meat and the production and then ultimately the consumption, of course. And these lobbies are the ones who are taking in Europe or our agricultural sector to a certain point. Sometimes we see, when we read these documents, there is a non-return point, a definitive point. For me, it's incomprehensible. They haven't consulted the agricultural sector, the transport sector. You cannot create an opinion or a regulation and without talking with the people who work there, without taking into consideration the people who day in and day out have to implement what the opinion states. So we reach a point beyond the one there's no return. It leads us, therefore, to very big contradictions.
Con el texto del reglamento o la pretensión de texto para que cumplamos tanto ganaderos como ganaderas.
This text that should be followed by cattle workers, agricultural workers, and transport workers.
El número 12 se incumple.
And we are going against the SDG number 12 because multiplying by 2 the CO2 emissions that we produce or that we would produce if this regulation was really applied. Why? Well, because giving more space to animals, on top of that, it depends which animals are. We're making them more harm because if they have more space, they can fall, they can be lesions. Us, workers, we could have problems with the canals. We also multiplied times 3 the amount of lorries or trucks in the streets, which in its turn is increasing the emissions. But also in the social arena, because this regulation also deals with the social part. When we see the temperatures in the south, in Italy, Spain, Greece, where we have from May over 25 degrees, and we have to do all this work of loading and unloading at night, automatically what you're making is that the workers that have to carry out this work, you are conditioning them to reduce their family conciliation for the well-being of people that are necessary for the well-being of people. Everything is important, of course, but social matters have a particularly weight on this. And it is also, it goes against SDG number 3, that is well-being for everyone, for animals, but also for people. When we are in a framework where we compare data from one sector and another, and we compare them, and we see that this text is leading us to this point, it makes us worry. It makes cattle workers, agricultural workers, and transport workers worry. Why? Because cause and effect will increase the costs. Certain studies that are being done by several sectors, that is between 10 and 15%, an increase in a kilo of meat. In this moment, the geopolitical arena that's being occupying Europe and the situation of families makes that a lot of families do not buy meat thinking the animal was in a truck 9 or 10 hours, so if it had 1 square meter or 50 centimeters.
Compran
no one thinks about that. They buy thinking of their pockets, of their budget. And this situation, therefore, should allow us to open our minds to see where Europe wants to take us with the current norms. And we hope it'll be like that, because I've also read the document.
Lo que nombraba antes Carlos.
The document that Carlos was mentioning before. I mean, there are a lot of documents. There's the agrarian document, and there's another one we couldn't, of the strategic dialogue. That's the one. Yes.
Señales que quieren cambiarse las cosas.
They show that things
en toda Europa están dando causa-efecto.
There's a willingness to change things. That the conversation that were in April and May are actually having an effect. But I have to say that farmers and agricultural workers have a hard time believing this is going to be true. First of all, we need willingness, in this case, political willingness, to see.
La podemos conseguir, pero tenemos que poner herramientas para poder conseguir esta luna.
That we can reach the moon, of course, but we need the tools to reach it. We cannot fix an objective of 2030, and we both know the worries we have in the environment. But this objective imposes certain things, and these impositions, we're not sure we can pay them. We don't know if the agricultural sector can continue to pay for these impositions. So this is the way it goes. As my colleagues have said, we have 3 saved, you know, and I think they're going to worry us a lot.
¿Estamos dispuestos los consumidores y consumidoras a pagar más?
Are the consumers willing to pay more for this degree of animal welfare that, in this case, from the different European institutions, they are presenting or thinking about? The question, and with this I'm talking to lobbies, all of these worries, you might remember that we carried out a
Todo esto se genera por unos intereses que detrás están estos lobbies que lo que quieren es conseguir este objetivo
that show that it goes the opposite, and we see that the people who want that is the lobbies, and what they want is to reduce meat consumption. And we say, for example, yes, we're going to increase emissions 3.5 times. And then what they say, no. What we want is there is less production, less animals traveling, because the production is going to reduce. So my question is, are we willing to continue to lose agricultural workers? I mean, last 3 caps, we've lost millions. Are we willing to pay that price? Are the consumers willing to pay more, as I already said? To preserve this balance that we need, that us, agricultural workers, cattle workers, are the first to believe that we need to find balance. But to find this balance, we need to be aware that we need tools and we need funds, different funds, different from the PAC, from the CAP. In order to reach this objective of 2030. I don't know how I'm doing time-wise. We still have a little bit of time. Okay, yeah, it's just my colleagues already talked a lot about this opinion. And
que se entiende perfectamente, espero que claramente aquí hay unos lobbies que están pujando fuerte por la proteína
vegetal. So what I want to say is there's a lot of lobbies that are pushing for vegetable protein and lab protein. So I'm wondering, do we want to go there, or do we want to maintain this balance of agricultural workers and farmers, and that we maintain the territories in the rural areas? Because this is a cause and effect.
Igual que ahora o mejor
we should produce in the same way or even better the food that we are producing. You need to choose. As I was saying with Maria this morning, us who are in this sector, we need to also to look inwards. We need to explain how we work, who, where and how. Who produces it, where it is produced, and how it is produced. And if we don't do this, we're going to lose this balance because society needs to be aware of this. And as producers, we need to explain it. We need to explain the way we produce our products, so that, depending on the messages people receive, they can have other speeches to make a decision to see if what they're consuming really has all this story that I'm trying to explain. I hope with this I invited you to create a healthy debate. Thank you.
Ahí están los lácteos que cuentan, ¿no, Nuria?
These are the dairies that count, no, Nuria? Who's also here, so that she can explain all these external elements and also what is behind the product that Carlos was showing as a sustainable product. While you think here in the room, if you haven't to ask a question or start the debate, I want to focus in the last point Jaume mentioned, that is, if there is so many efforts to decarbonize the sector and advance sustainability, and this is the reality that we see here, with good results in a good rhythm, although we still need time to reach the objectives they want, when they want. So why do they continue to point a finger towards the cattle and dairy sectors as the first greenhouse emissions? They should use it as any other sector and see it. And what is actually failing when it comes to defending this sector? The question is for the three of you, and you can answer in whichever order. Yes, I'm going to answer, says Paula. We three, we know each other. I think we gave complementary speeches, and we gave a very holistic vision of the current situation. The question is, why are we the ones being pointed at? And this might be more of a personal answer than a COPA-Cogeca answer, but the impression I have that for some reason there's people who make more noise than us. And perhaps this is what we say, a more of a sentimental argument and less of a scientific argument. Scientific argument does not have so much sex appeal in the social media, and they have more of an emotional argument that goes further. You know, this is a clear marketing strategy. Netflix or any other social media, it's going to first appeal to your feelings, and this is what they do. Perhaps this is the success that others have had that we have not managed to do it. We in COPA-Cogeca, we are part of a platform that is very committed in communicating and diffusing the reality of the cattle sector, the livestock sector,
y sobre todo deshacer o desmontar los mitos
and trying to demystify certain myths that exist on production and also in other external productions.
Sustitutos vegetales.
They're talking about vegetable substitution. What goes behind this? If we could go even further to see who is behind this campaigns. I don't want to go too long, but
una de las conversaciones que tengo
One of the conversations that we have very often,
que es de mucho antes de que yo naciera,
and it's an example that goes way before I was born in the 60s, when in the United States this campaigns against animal fat started. Who was behind this? The sugar sector, the producers of all pastries, and they started to give the blame to the animal fat, and they entered in the market. And we see what happened, you see in the United States, the obesity levels, and what we see is that people really want to reach here the same point because of marketing strategies. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we open the consumer's eyes? Perhaps you're leading towards something that is not good for you, that is done by people with hidden interests. The biggest seller of potatoes in the United States is being shown is also behind these strategies. So obviously they want to continue to say to sell potatoes, so they do that strategy.
Por una parte, en la propuesta de transporte vamos a incrementar la
About this proposal, when it comes to transport, we're going to increase the production of greenhouse emissions. But of course, though the defenders of this, if you reduce the production, you reduce the transport. And when you say you're going to double the transport, you say you're going to reduce it in half, yes, very well, but then the sector is over. So you need to see what's hidden behind this. And the dairy and the bovine sector is increased a lot in different waste management and manure and renewables. The sector is advancing, it is modernizing, but we need time because there are objectives that are not done in 5 years, that are political objectives, but in the economy, in the agricultural sector, this cannot be done in 5 years. So we need to learn the calendars of everyone. And so we're going to say the emissions are different in every case, and each case should be analyzed individually. And this is the things we need to communicate in a more effective manner. How? We're trying to find this way. Santiago, do you agree? Is this a problem of communication? Yes, there is a very big communication problem. For me, the diet is very clear, particularly in Spain. We talk about Mediterranean diet, and it's very clearly we have very big quality products. Quality products that include meat, and for me, the fact that this sector is penalized or blamed.
Aquí en el norte de Europa son muy dados a la mantequilla, al aceite.
Here in the north of Europe, they defend a lot of butter and less oil, and butter is also nutritive and very good. So I wonder, why don't we point a finger towards those that we know that are very harmful, like the ones ultra-processed meats. And they talk about synthetic pudding as if being in the definite position. And yeah, this might have into consideration certain environmental aspects, but when it comes to social and rural areas, it is very harmful consequences, and no one talks about this. So it is a communication struggle that we need to inform. As we said, it's not as pretty. There's not that pretty to see a truck going to the slaughterhouse, but the diet is proven. We know this is benefit. We know how much we should be consumed, and until now we've had good results. Yeah, that's clear. Spain is the second country in the world that has the longest life expectancy, so maybe our diet is best. So yeah, we have to communicate towards the society, but perhaps the walls are from the legislators. So it seems that the studies of the social, economic ecological impacts, they're not taken into consideration, and we're not able to communicate the consequences of this race towards sustainability without taking into consideration what is left behind, what is there here. You talk lobbies, but why is this sector having so much trouble being included in these decisions?
So we still need to learn how to explain ourselves and provide arguments and reasons for what we do. We have to be a lobby as well, either we like it or not. In Europe, it works like that. I've been collaborating with the European Economic and Social Committee for 2 years, and it's clearer for me every time. If you allow me, I wanted to change subjects, saying that we need to improve communication, right? So then we have to educate. And what's my point here?
Teniendo o ver el resultado de la educación en estos momentos en las escuelas.
We are not seeing the results of education in the schools where
se les enseña. Hablo de la educación en primaria y secundaria.
I'm talking about primary and secondary education. We did an assessment in COAG. We wanted to create a subject in the schools about agriculture. What's our objective? If we don't work with younger people, with children, where they are well fed, the food is correctly, they haven't received many messages from different lobbies, for example. I think it's important that they know where their food comes from. We need to invest in this type of education. Otherwise, other lobbies will win. Lobbies which spread fast messages, which are not always precise. If you don't have an educational foundation about who, how, when, then they will probably make wrong decisions. So our message has to be delivered, and I think it has to be done through primary and secondary education. We did an extensive work thinking about how to include these subjects about agriculture and the food chain. We thought about where to include this subject, including it in the second and third semester, for example, and we think this is key, to change the mindset. If children aged 9, 10 years and they don't have some education about who is producing, for example, livestock breeders, agricultures, farmers, how is the food processed, where does it come from? They need to know, otherwise they will choose other types of food. So here we are in Brussels, in many legislation coming from here, from Brussels, we see a tendency for standardization, and maybe they don't take into account the specific elements of the regions. We are seeing a political problem, lack of knowledge for decision makers, and here we want to reach to some conclusion. So how can revert this tendency? I think legislation should be more adapted to the different realities. This is a big workload for the institutions. But we need to recognize the diversity in Europe for any sector, because we cannot compare the dairy sector in Spain with Sweden, for example. Concerning the transport of animals, well, if there's a standardization of the temperature, for example, for transporting animals, we see that in the south of Spain, where I come from, the temperatures are pretty high. So maybe regulations should be adapted. What we can do is provide as much information as possible so that they are aware of the situation. We have to be proactive in this process.
Afecta bastante al sector lácteo, al ganadero en concreto. Cuando la Comisión abrió ese buzón de información,
for example, opened a space for any organization or citizens to provide information, specific information, and from our organizations we identified this as an opportunity. And we are aware that in Brussels sometimes it's difficult to bear in mind that these regulations have to be transposed to the different member states. And I think this is our role, to provide them with the extra information they need. Jaume, you share spaces, you work with colleagues from different countries. So do you think it's difficult, or is it easy to identify that countries are different in all senses, for example, in the animal welfare, and how temperatures or climate can affect the animal welfare? Yes. We understand the situation. We understand that it's not the same to talk about the situation in Ireland than in Spain. We are aware that each country has specific elements and a different context. I said this at the beginning of the regulation. When we were analyzing the regulation, we identified that they didn't take this into account. For example, if there are differences in temperatures in the north and south of Europe, or if the conditions of the road are different from one country to the other, you cannot standardize a regulation concerning these conditions, because it won't work in the practice. In the EESC, I know they are analyzing the costs. And the results of these assessments are usually showing where to work, as to provide a relation cost effect of your work. I really hope that this work is taken into account in Brussels, because it reflects the reality of each sector involved in this regulation. I could talk about InLac, Alianza, Import. I think almost all interprofessional associations working in this field. COPA-Cogeca, for example, I know that has done a lot of work in this field, but is insisting one more time, providing more data as to prove that this regulation is not correct. Either we achieve this or not, I think there must be political willingness. I hope that this new cycle, this new mandate the European Parliament is starting, will take this political willingness into account. I hope they sit and listen to the realities of the different sectors, because if we will continue in the same pathway, nothing will change. Is there any question? Can you pass the microphone?
Adelante, Carla.
Ms. Carla, it's not really a question, it's a reaction as a representative from the Commission. I think you are saying that it's important that the sector improves, and I think that sometimes we, from our institutions, have to continue working on communication, because you are talking about Brussels, and you were talking about the regulation on transport. I don't know if you think that in these buildings we are all from Finland or from Germany. Our head of unit is from Italy, so we know about the road conditions, we know about high temperatures in the summer. And even if he was not the head of unit, we have different colleagues from different countries. There are different groups from different sections, from different DGs in the Commission, and what I want to say is that even if we work here in Brussels, it doesn't mean that we only take the Belgium conditions or the Northern Europe conditions into account. No, we are a very diverse group. It is a very participatory process. If anyone wants to raise their hand, have you read the evaluation assessment, which is a complementary document for the regulation you are talking about? There's an impact assessment, I repeat, which goes with any legislative proposal. In this assessment, we see the economic impact, and we do many consultations. No, I'm just saying this because I have the feeling that you think that this document is elaborated by a guy who woke up one morning and said, okay, the reality from now on will be this one. It's not like that. The Commission elaborates proposals and does many consultations, and now the text, for example, is being reviewed by the Parliament and the Council to make amendments, to approve it, sorry. The day this regulation is published, it will be published based on the review of the Parliament and Council. From the Commission, all we do is like create the first draft, and then they can do whatever they want with the regulation. So I just wanted to remind you that what is published is because it has been approved by the ministers of our member states in the Council and from the European Parliament, from representatives which have been voted by people. Let's not forget each one's responsibility in this process. First, you said, is the regulation, is the report published already? The report you mentioned? When the Commission submits a proposal, there's always an impact assessment which is published as well. Okay, Carlos, we are not doubting the work you're doing. We are not questioning it. That was not my intention, of course. And of course, I'm aware that you write the proposal which has to be voted by the Parliament and the Council. But I think we are still in the phase of the proposal and modifying the proposal. Okay? If this proposal includes a pathway which will lead us to the same objectives, this doesn't mean that the work has not been done properly. We are just saying that the results or the message
que no están contrastadas. No lo has dicho así. Has dicho,
it's maybe not the correct one. We are not saying that the data you have isn't accurate.
En el sentido de agravar los temas al sector. Son muchos años.
But I can tell you, it's been many years. I've been here in the sector for a long time.
And
when we have the opportunity to be in a space like this, if I talked
y la tenía, y hablando desde aquí, desde dentro,
a perspective. But since I'm now collaborating with European Economic and Social Committee, I have another perspective. Just at some point I had to say, okay, these were good ideas. I didn't think they would be. But here we are representatives from different livestock breeders associations, and our duty is to provide the most accurate reality. And it's important to improve communication, as I said before, because sometimes we say white and they understand black. This means that we are not questioning your work, but we trust most livestock breeders are demonstrating. And why are we doing that? Because what's approved in the Parliament is not benefiting us. And this is not just one time. As I said before, we lost almost 6 million farmers, and we are tired. We are interested in improving the sector, but we need tools, we need resources, we need money. Otherwise, we will continue having this institutional perspective, and that's it. That's why the document on the strategic dialogue, it's an opportunity. And I said it, it's been a while since we are asking for these opportunities. Let's see if this will become a reality, such as, for example, creating an additional budget parallel to CAP, or, for example, fostering the presence of the professional, not basing everything on the hectares. This shows a political willingness to change things in this document. Things could change, yes. I understood your message. I understand that you propose things, but this proposal, this specific proposal about the regulation, once analyzed, is missing this sense of transmitting the reality of the sector. This driver who says, if I have to work from 10 to 9 every day for 6 months, well, when am I going to be home with my family, right? So our reaction is stronger and stronger. Why? Because the reality is as well. And I just wanted to reply to you because on our side, I don't know if my colleagues agree, we are trying to create a stronger position. Demonstrations showed that. And why is this? Because every day we are losing a lot. Santiago wanted to take the floor as well. I think the farmer don't care about who did the proposal, who voted for the proposal. Maybe they don't know, they don't care. But they have to apply what the legislation says. I think it's very positive that there are impact assessments. But it's not the same to propose something which then will have to be removed. The Commission has several proposals where they realized that it was not the moment for that regulation, and I think that it's not positive to continue doing the same process at the Commission. I think it's important to bear in mind that they have to listen to all the stakeholders in the sector and then create a proposal. That's our perspective. That's our perspective, because then we see differences in communication. Maybe the Commission is proposing something with all the goodwill, but then the Parliament and the Council modified everything. And what's important is the regulation that the farmers have to apply. Yes, so we talked about a change of cycle with all the demonstrations in the sector. So let's try to conclude with a positive message. For example, the Draghi report is trying to focus on competitiveness for all sectors. So which message of hope can we convey here today, knowing that this is important for us, because it's the survival of this sector. We have to continue being sustainable. Can you pass the microphone to Tomás? I have good news and bad news. I'll start with the bad news. When you... It's very easy to say it's somebody's fault. We can say it's the Commission's fault, it's the immigrants' fault, it's the Mercosur agreement's fault, but things are not white or black. So when we have to start explaining the efforts of a sector in order to advance in their pathway and the objectives established, well, we don't have enough space in Twitter, right? So the bad news is that we live in a world of fake news, where people make statements even knowing they are fake, but it's for their own interests. Then we are facing challenges when we want to provide real communication, and that affects all fields in our lives. Communicating complex things in a world where people are informed via Twitter, well, it's a very complicated task. The good news is that we are making great progress. We've continued working, and we will continue working. And I think in order to fight this disinformation, now we don't talk about lies in this world, we talk about fake news. Well, I don't like the word fake news or the term fake news. I prefer to call them lies directly. Anyways, we need to continue improving our communication. And I have to say that I have hope. I have the feeling that there's more awareness from the moment the strategic dialogue was approved by the Commission, the Parliament and the Council. The report and the conclusion, I will remind you that the group of strategic dialogue, there were high-level people. For example, the president of Greenpeace, the president of COPA-Cogeca, the president of La Via Campesina, and for the dairy sector, well, there were high-level representatives, and they were able to reach an agreement, create a difficult, complex document, and they created a strategic dialogue. And that's why I'm hopeful today. We have a question. Can you introduce yourself and ask the question? Yes, good morning.
Buenos días.
Good morning. I'm Miguel Martín. I work in the permanent representation for Spain, and I work in the discussion meetings for these transport regulations. Even if Nuria said that she doesn't like figures, I have to say that in communication and participation in this type of proposals just reminded you that in the process of adopting all the legislation at a European level, there's a process of public consultation for these proposals for animal welfare. There was a public consultation where everybody could participate. There were 56,000 answers, and 90% came from citizens. This to say that everyone could participate: farmers, civil servants, veterinarians, drivers, everyone could participate. From Spain, which is a very important topic for this country, there were only a 6% of answers, which is about 3,000 answers. And you can see how important this industry is for this country. And still, there were only 3,000 answers. Sweden, for example, submitted many more questions. So I think there are other ways to participate, to show our interests, concerns, opinion. And maybe these ways or these resources are not used properly. What's your opinion about why people do not participate if it's that important for our country? Second question, second comment. Also raising awareness on the value of the work of the institutions. You said that when you have to apply a regulation, people don't care about where it comes from. Well, I think it's important to know the origin of a legislative piece, because the Commission did it with all its goodwill, using updated data, using scientific data, collaborating with EFSA. Sometimes we are interested in the reports and we consider they are really good, and when it's not pro our interests, then these are not so good reports. As I said, this is a proposal that we do from the Commission. Then at the Parliament, at the Council, maybe they will erase the whole text, everything. So in the end, the final text is not from the Commission, but from the Council and the Parliament. If you think that it could be improved, you should provide more information, because you are saying things such as, for example, some organization appealing to feelings, to the emotional part, but there are no scientific base. But at the same time, we ask for things, or we ask for further information or for other perspectives which are not based on anything. And I just wanted to say that the Commission is flexible to adapt, to change, and we vote And then there's a voting from 27 member states and from representatives from the people in the European Parliament. So if you're asking for things, let's do it based on scientific data and bearing in mind that the institutions always have a participatory process. And I know that the Commission did their best based on the accessible data. Of course, things can be improved. The Commission is open to that, to accept any change. But let's try not to undermine a newly submitted proposal when we can still change it.
Muchas gracias. Tomás quiere contestar.
Thank you very much. Thomas, do you want to reply? No, just to explain. For me, there's a key image, and is that the new institutional procedure, I would compare it with the MUS, a game we practice a lot in Spain. I don't know if you play MUS or not, Paula, but I see you reacting. Well, once the proposal is in the Commission, it's the Council and the Parliament, and they can only look. They can give fire, they can water on it, but those that have the control in the game are the Commission and the Council, and the Parliament. The only one that can ask the opinion is the Social and Economic Committee of the European Union. And they still only lookouts, but still they can give their opinion, and we are in this part right now. Yeah, of course we can improve the current document. I don't know the details. But let's say it's supposedly improvable, let's be politically correct, and in the Economic and Social Committee you're carrying out your job. Now we need scientific evidence to the people who take decisions, that is this gentleman here and his bosses, and also for the MEPs, so that we can move forward. We're in a phase that is very interesting, is very passionate, so congratulations. And well, let's continue.
Nos quedan 10 minutitos para cerrar.
Okay, we have 10 minutes to finish, so I would like you, of course, on top of the reply you want to give, Santiago, I would like you to give a conclusion, and I would hope that it's positive, because we are face a sector that have challenges that they need to face. They ask for more time, for more financing, for more this and that. But I like what he said. It's that we are facing a new cycle, and I would like, therefore, a conclusion of others, perhaps a positive conclusion, so that all the other sectors that are trying there cannot be disincentivized. Yes, first I would like to reply to the gentleman here. Of course, we want to improve the situation of agricultural workers, farmers. We need them to be better trained, and we're trying to do our best. But of course, we are here in a permanent representation in Brussels, and we want to avoid the agriculture sector to have to connect to every survey, to have to understand every process that there is. That is why we're here for. We give them to them, we send them to them, and we translate them. But for me, the best server, it is that the Commission talks to us and to do the... And with the different farmers. We've spent months from COPA-Cogeca and Asaja telling the European Union that the current Mercosur and EU trade agreement is not viable, not as it is, not right now, not with the consumption patterns that they are right now. And they know their director, we know everyone. We've shared this information with them, but this is not enough. And yes, I admit the responsibility of we need to train farmers and we need to give them the information. And as we've said, for us, the main part is the farmers and agricultural workers. And yes, they need to go online and reply to the surveys, and we try to do it just like COPA-Cogeca and COAG and all the others. But agricultural workers and cattle workers have a lot of work. It's difficult for them, and we are the intermediary. That's what we're here for. Okay, to conclude, of course, we are in the correct path. We don't deny that. And we should be proud of the measures that we are taking and the path we are forging, because we can be considered pioneers in a global level. If they follow us or not, that is a different matter, but we need to demonstrate that it is possible. But that's what we need. The direction towards sustainability has already been set, and we're going to work with you. We're going to follow that path, but we need to listen to us. This change of paradigm is important, and we thank the Commission for this. Thank you. Paula? Yes, thank you very much for your questions. I've written down a lot of things, but I think they'll be reserved with an ad hoc meeting with Carlos or Miguel Ángel. But to do a positive conclusion, I hope that something is clear, that we don't have anything against improving or going better. I think we both need to work together, research, NGOs, farmers, the institutions, and we don't agree. If we have a strategic dialects, there are certain battles that are won and lost, say, but you need to keep that. If they invited you to carry out this exercise and you've managed to get some of the things you wanted, well, let's keep the positive side and let's try to be proactive. And this is what we're trying to do in the strategic dialogue. The thing is, there's the things that were more liked and less liked. But of course, if you leave shutting the door, well, you won't be called again and no one will be taking your opinion into consideration. So we need to continue. So from the COPA-Cogeca, we have worked and we like to continue being this active. We've also talked recently with DG Agri, DG Agriculture, because we like to be involved in the projects from the beginning when it is being designed, to guarantee that it will be useful for us and that the science is clearly based, not only, as if we said, in a laboratory experiment, that perhaps it was our biggest problem in the whole process that followed from farm to fork, but this might be a discussion for later. But we want these projects to be based on what's happening on the ground, on the day-to-day life of every farmer. So we would like to use this time to generate studies, to bring about different studies for the Commission, that the Commission has requested them, and we are trying to comply. I'm going to be maybe a bit more provocative. We like a lot better the communication with the Commission after Farm to Fork than the one we had during it. And the communication with all the Gs has been improved from this strategic dialogue, and I hope this continues, because communication is very important. As Santiago said, I think we're going on the right path, and I hope we continue there. Jaume, you have the closing words. Well, yes, of course, positive is a word we need to keep in mind. And we need to focus on this vision of the Spanish agricultural that we complain and complain. We're carrying out a campaign within COAG in this sense. Because if we don't look the positive part at the beginning instead of being negative, we won't move forward. Sometimes it's difficult, but we need to keep being optimistic, because if we want other generations to follow afterwards, If we don't give them a positive message, we will never manage to have young people working in agricultural or cattle industries. This is why this is important. People who come afterwards have to have a positive message, but now a real positive message. No imagination and selling them a big bubble that can burst at any moment. Martín was talking about this survey. Yeah, I replied to the survey. You said about 3,000 Spaniards. You have one of those 3,000 here. But Miguel, most of them, they don't reply to the survey because they are disenchanted. They have a negative mindset and they believe, what's the use of these surveys when at the same time for other paths we've defended, we've given documents, we've presented, and no one listened to us. There's a lot of farmers that have this mindset. Why am I going to take the time to reply to this? It is useless. That is why I think this is what is missing. We need to give this positive message so that people can believe again in the European institutions, so that people can have tangible examples of the benefits of the institutions. As I say, all of this factors together that make the situation in the sector what it is. But we want to be positioned. The document of the strategic dialogue opens certain avenues that before were closed. And we've already transmitted this to our associates, to all the farmers we represent. We've already told them that this is a good beginning, and we don't want to be pessimistic. We're not saying this is starting well, it's going to finish wrong. No, it is a good start, and we're all going to work together to make it continue on the correct path. And that is our role of the organizations like COPA-Cogeca, like Via Campesina, that are represented in the 29 people that took part in the strategic dialogue. And we all had to make some concessions, all of us. And this is something that the Commission, that had played a good role there, could manage to do. That is, that we could give this message to our farmers, a positive message that until now they only receive negative information. To conclude, as a professional information, I would like to say that the dairy sector is on the path of reaching this sustainability. We are being pushed very strongly, and if they give us more space, perhaps we could reach it in a more calm manner. But the dairy sector, as all the food and agricultural system, is pioneer in this sense, and this is something that we need to start to present as a difference that gives us an impulse to improve competitivity. What we've learned is both the institutions that propose are the ones that decide, as well as the affected sectors. Not only they have to talk to each other, but they need to listen. You have to talk, but you need to listen as well, so that everyone can take part in this decision-making process, so that the decisions are grounded, and there we can reach the objectives that both the institutions and the sector has decided, that is decarbonization and a more sustainable sector. With this, we finish this forum of sustainability in the dairy sector. I hope we've had a next one. This year we've had the subject being the decarbonization, a green agenda, and animal welfare will be the focus of this debate. So what we need to know is that we need to take into consideration the dairy sector, and we cannot forget all the benefits of this dairy products. We should have 3 a day. And we'd like to thank everyone, all the different institutions, European institutions and other organizations, of everyone who helped us to diffuse the reality of the dairy sector and their help to improve the dairy sector and the lives of everyone in Europe and in the planet. Thank you very much.